Back in the vehicle.
I am Dr. Amara Nwosu, Chief of Cardiothoracic Surgery at St. Augustine Medical Center. I have a patient with an active aortic dissection 4 blocks from here. Move your vehicle.
I have an alert for a stolen vehicle matching your plate. I need to verify.
Let me tell you exactly what those body cameras recorded. A marked hospital emergency van with surgical emergency written on 3 exterior surfaces and emergency lights running was stopped by a police officer who did not run a plate check before activating his lights. The driver got out immediately with her hospital identification already in her hand. She told him who she was, what she was driving, where she was going, and why it could not wait. She showed him the live vital signs of her patient on the dashboard screen. She asked him to run a 4-second plate check. He told her the procedure required a second unit. He told her 15 to 20 minutes. She called the hospital. The hospital called the precinct. The precinct confirmed the error at 9:52 p.m., 5 minutes into the stop. The patrol vehicle did not move for another 29 minutes. Dr. Amara Nwosu is 44 years old. She is the Chief of Cardiothoracic Surgery at St. Augustine Medical Center. She holds the only Type A aortic dissection repair certification in the city, a subspecialty qualification that took 6 years of additional training to obtain, and that fewer than 40 surgeons hold in the entire state. She is on call on the evening of February 6th because there is no one else. Her patient, David Osei, 41 years old, father of 3, construction foreman for 16 years, drove himself to the emergency room at 8:15 p.m. because he thought the chest pain was indigestion. It was not indigestion. It was a dissecting aortic aneurysm that had been diagnosed, prepared, and opened by the surgical team by 9:15 p.m. They have been waiting for Dr. Nwosu since 9:31 p.m. when she was paged. She was in the hospital's marked emergency van at 9:34 p.m. She was watching David Osei's blood pressure on the dashboard screen from 9:36 p.m. She was pulled over at 9:47 p.m. Officer Paul Greer is 33 years old, 4 years on the force. He receives a dispatch alert at 9:44 p.m. Stolen dark blue vehicle, license plate beginning NF7, last seen northbound on the Meridian Avenue corridor. The hospital van's plate begins MG4. The hospital van is not the vehicle described in the alert in any particular beyond the blue color and the presence of a black woman driver. Greer stops it at 9:47 p.m. His body camera, which activates automatically when his patrol lights engage, begins recording before he exits the vehicle. It records everything from the moment the lights go on. Officer Dana Paulson is 29 years old. She is Greer's partner. Her body camera is also running. She is standing 6 feet to Greer's left throughout the stop. Her camera captures the dashboard screen showing David Osei's vitals from a different angle than Greer's. It captures the number at 9:47 p.m., and at 9:52 p.m., and at 10:03 p.m., and at 10:21 p.m. when the patrol vehicle finally moves. The jury will be shown Paulson's camera angle for the vital sequence, specifically because it captures the screen more clearly than Greer's. They will watch the number fall across 34 minutes in 4 captured frames. They will not need the anesthesiologist's testimony to understand what the number means, but they will have it anyway. The hospital's emergency dispatch coordinator is a woman named Patricia Osei. No relation to David Osei, a coincidence that the trial's opening statement notes and does not belabor. She receives Dr. Nwosu's call at 9:50 p.m. She calls the precinct's duty desk at 9:51 p.m. She reaches the duty sergeant at 9:52 p.m. She tells him the following in order in under 90 seconds. The van stopped on Meridian Avenue northbound is a St. Augustine Medical Center fleet vehicle. Its plate returns a hospital fleet registration in the department's own database. The driver is Dr. Amara Nwosu, Chief of Cardiothoracic Surgery, whose credentials are on file with the department's Medical Emergency Liaison Office. The patient she is responding to has a dissecting aortic aneurysm and is on the operating table at St. Augustine. And the delay is measured in the patient's remaining survival window, which is closing. The duty sergeant says, "I will contact the officer." He contacts Greer by radio at 9:53 p.m. Greer acknowledges. The patrol vehicle does not move. David Osei dies at 10:33 p.m. He is 4 blocks from the point of the stop. He is 41 years old. His wife Grace and their 3 children, aged 14, 11, and 7, are in the waiting room at St. Augustine when Dr. Nwosu comes through the operating room doors at 10:35 p.m. The 14-year-old knows from her face before she speaks. Type 4 seconds if you understand what it means that the check that would have ended the stop before it became a stop took 4 seconds and was never run. Amara Nwosu grew up in Enugu, Nigeria, raised by a civil engineer father and a nurse mother who taught their children that education exists to make you genuinely useful when it matters most. She came to the United States at 18 on a full academic scholarship and spent the next 26 years building one of the most specialized surgical careers in the state. By 44, she holds the only Type A aortic dissection repair certification in the city, a qualification fewer than 40 surgeons hold statewide. She is chief of cardiothoracic surgery at St. Augustine Medical Center and on call on the evening of February 6th because there is no one else. She is paged at 9:31 p.m. and in the marked hospital van at 9:34 p.m., watching David Osei's blood pressure decline on the dashboard screen and knowing exactly what the number means and how much time it represents. When Greer's lights appear in her mirror at 9:47 p.m., she does not panic. She presents her credentials, shows the screen, calls the hospital, and builds the record that will matter later with the composure of 17 years of operating rooms. David Osei is not alive when she gets through. Paul Greer is 33 years old, 4 years on the force, with no pattern of racial profiling in his recorded stops, and no history of sustained complaints. He is not a bad officer. He is an officer who receives an alert, makes a stop, and then makes a sequence of choices that each appear individually defensible, and that collectively become something that cannot be defended. He does not run the plate before the stop because the procedure does not technically require it. He calls for a second unit because the procedure requires one before clearance. He does not move when the precinct confirms the error at 9:52 p.m. because the procedure has no exception for confirmed medical emergencies. He does not move when his supervisor contacts him because the transmission is guidance rather than a direct order. He follows the procedure for 34 minutes while a man dies 4 blocks away. He is the human expression of an institutional failure he did not author. He does not understand the full weight of what has happened until his watch commander plays him both body cameras on a split screen the following morning, and he watches David Osei's blood pressure fall across 6 frames and counts the timestamps in silence. Dana Paulson is 29 years old, 3 years on the force, and Greer's partner at the stop. She does not initiate it. She does not make the calls. She stands 6 feet to Greer's left for 34 minutes, and her body camera captures the dashboard screen at a clearer angle than Greer's, recording David Osei's blood pressure in the 6 frames that become the most significant evidence sequence in the trial. She does not intervene. She does not run the plate on her own terminal. She does not contact the supervisor independently. She follows Greer's lead for the full 34 minutes. She is not charged and not named as an individual defendant, but her presence and non-action are addressed directly in the David Osei Act's requirement that any officer present at such a stop is individually responsible for initiating the plate check if the stopping officer does not. She requests a transfer 4 months after the incident. She attends David Osei's memorial service. She stands at the back for 20 minutes. Then she leaves. Patricia Osei has been St. Augustine's emergency dispatch coordinator for 11 years. She receives Dr. Nwosu's call at 9:50 p.m. and spends the next 29 minutes making 4 calls to 4 different people with the authority to move the patrol vehicle. She reaches the duty sergeant, the hospital's legal counsel, the department's medical emergency liaison, and Greer's watch commander in sequence. Every call delivers the same confirmed information: hospital fleet vehicle, valid registration, certified surgeon, active surgical emergency. Every call reaches someone who can act. None of them moves the vehicle until the watch commander dispatches a supervisor who arrives in person at 10:19 p.m. and gives an order that leaves no procedural ambiguity. She files an 11-page incident report at 7 a.m. on February 7th, documenting every call, every timestamp, every response, and every minute between 9:52 p.m., when the precinct first confirmed the error, and 10:21 p.m. when the vehicle finally moved. It becomes Exhibit C in the civil trial and is read in its entirety on day 3. The jury is very quiet during the reading. Patricia Osei made 4 calls in 29 minutes and moved nothing. The 11 pages are the record of what it costs when the procedure has no mechanism for the word confirmed to mean what it means. The body camera footage from both officers is continuous, time-stamped to 1/10 of a second, and covers every moment of the stop from the activation of the patrol lights to the movement of the patrol vehicle. What follows is a direct account of what the cameras recorded, in sequence, without interpretation. 9:47:03 p.m. Greer's lights activate. Both body cameras begin recording. The hospital van is visible in the forward camera angle. Surgical emergency is legible on the van's side panel. 9:47:31 p.m. Dr. Nwosu exits the van with identification in hand before either officer reaches the vehicle. 9:47:44 p.m. Greer reaches Dr. Nwosu. The first exchange begins. Paulson's camera captures the dashboard screen through the van's windshield. David Osei's blood pressure is visible at 9:47 p.m. 74 systolic. 9:48:12 p.m. Dr. Nwosu presents her hospital ID and surgical credentials simultaneously. Greer's camera captures both documents at sufficient resolution to read the text. He holds them for 4 seconds. He hands them back. 9:49:07 p.m. Dr. Nwosu turns the dashboard screen toward Greer directly. Greer's camera captures the screen, 71 systolic. Greer looks at the screen for 2 seconds. He looks back at Dr. Nwosu. He says, "The second unit will verify when they arrive." 9:50:44 p.m. Dr. Nwosu places her first call to the hospital. Greer's camera captures her speaking. Paulson's camera captures the dashboard screen at this moment. 68 systolic. 9:52:18 p.m. Greer's radio activates. The duty sergeant's voice is audible on the body camera audio. The vehicle is confirmed as a St. Augustine Medical Center fleet vehicle. Plate returns hospital registration. Driver confirmed as Dr. Amara Nwosu, Chief of Cardiothoracic Surgery. Medical emergency confirmed. Greer acknowledges. He says, "Copy." He does not move toward the patrol vehicle. 9:52:31 p.m. Dr. Nwosu is looking at Greer's face when the radio transmission ends. Her expression does not change. She looks at the dashboard screen. She looks at the radio on his belt. She says very quietly, "You just received confirmation. Move your vehicle." Greer says, "I need the second unit on scene." She says, "You received confirmation from your own precinct 30 seconds ago." He says, "Procedure requires physical verification." She says nothing further. She looks at the dashboard screen. Paulson's camera captures it, 64 systolic. 9:53 p.m. Greer's watch commander contacts him by radio. The transmission is audible on the body camera. Greer acknowledges. He says, "Second unit is en route. I will clear when they arrive." The watch commander does not issue a direct order. Greer does not move. 10:03:22 p.m. Paulson's camera captures the dashboard screen, 57 systolic. Dr. Nwosu is standing beside the van with her arms at her sides, looking north on Meridian Avenue in the direction of the hospital. She is not speaking. She has said everything that can be said. The body cameras record her silence for the next 17 minutes and 51 seconds. 10:19:04 p.m. A supervisor's vehicle enters the frame of both body cameras from the south. The supervisor reaches Greer in 40 seconds. The exchange lasts 92 seconds. The supervisor's final words are audible on both cameras. "Move it now." The patrol vehicle moves at 10:21:09 p.m. 10:21:40 p.m., Dr. Nwosu is back in the van. The emergency lights are still running. They have been running for 34 minutes and 37 seconds. The van accelerates northbound and exits the camera frame. 10:21:41 p.m. Paulson's camera captures the dashboard screen one final time through the van's rear window as it pulls away. The number is no longer visible. The van is gone. The timestamp reads 10:21:41 p.m. The operating room is 4 blocks north. David Osei has 22 minutes left. Dr. James Obi is 28 years old. He is the third-year resident who is holding David Osei on the operating table, while Dr. Nwosu is stopped on Meridian Avenue. He is doing everything within the boundary of his training. He is doing it precisely and completely, and with the full understanding that the boundary of his training is not the boundary of what this patient needs, and that crossing it in these conditions would accelerate the outcome it is meant to prevent. He holds the boundary for 34 minutes. He holds it with both hands and everything he knows, and the knowledge running beneath everything else, that the surgeon he is holding for is 4 blocks away and the blocks are not closing. Dr. Nwosu enters the operating room at 10:29 p.m. She takes one look at the monitors. She looks at Obi. He says, "Pressure is 51. She says, "Get me in." The team moves. She works with the speed and precision of someone who has been preparing for this intervention since 9:31 p.m. and who has spent 34 minutes on a curb making sure that every second of preparation she could do outside the room was done. She works for 4 minutes. At 10:31 p.m., David Osei's blood pressure reaches the threshold that the anesthesiologist will later testify is the point of no clinical return. At 10:33 p.m., she calls time of death. 2 minutes and 14 seconds from entry to time of death. 34 minutes of Meridian Avenue and 4 minutes of operating room, and 2 minutes and 14 seconds from entry to the word she says when she removes her gloves. She stands at the table for 11 seconds after she calls it. Then she goes to the family. Grace Osei is 38 years old. She is a secondary school mathematics teacher. She has been in the waiting room at St. Augustine since 9 p.m. when her husband called her from the emergency room and told her it was not indigestion and she needed to come. She has been doing the mathematics of the monitors and the elapsed time and the absence of news in the specific and relentless way of a mathematics teacher who cannot stop herself from calculating even when the calculation is the thing she most wants to stop. Dr. Nwosu comes through the operating room doors at 10:35 p.m. Grace Osei looks at her face and does the final calculation in about 2 seconds. She holds her 14-year-old against her side. She listens to everything Dr. Nwosu says. She asks one question at the end. She asks, what was his name? Dr. Nwosu says the officer's name is Paul Greer, badge 1477. Grace takes the parking receipt from her coat pocket. She writes the name on the back in the specific and careful handwriting of a mathematics teacher who writes for precision rather than speed. She puts it back in her pocket. She does not cry in the waiting room. She cries in the car on the way home after the children are asleep in the back seat and the road is dark and there is nothing left to calculate. She contacts Renee Caldwell's office at 7:15 a.m. on February 7th. She says, "I want to understand exactly what happened, and I want it to cost exactly what it cost." Caldwell says, "I understand." She says, "I will need to see the body camera footage." Grace says, "I already requested it. It was submitted to the public records portal at 6 a.m. this morning." Caldwell says, "Who submitted it?" Grace says, "Patricia Osei from the hospital's dispatch office." She filed her incident report at 7 a.m. and attached the footage request. Caldwell says, "I will call her." Grace says, "She is already expecting your call." The body camera footage from both officers becomes the foundation of the entire case, and the reason the case requires almost no additional construction. Caldwell describes it in her opening statement as the rarest category of evidence in a civil rights case, evidence that was created by the defendant, preserved by the defendant's own systems, and that proves the plaintiff's case more completely than any evidence the plaintiff could have independently produced. The combined body camera footage, both cameras, continuous, time-stamped, the van's markings legible before either officer exits the patrol vehicle. The credentials presented and visible on camera at sufficient resolution to read. The dashboard screen captured at 6 points across 34 minutes, showing David Osei's blood pressure at 74, 71, 68, 64, 57, and 51 systolic. The radio transmission at 9:52 p.m., in which the precinct confirms the vehicle, the plate, the driver, and the emergency. Greer's acknowledgement. The patrol vehicle not moving. The supervisor arriving. The vehicle moving at 10:21 p.m. The van accelerating north. The jury watches both camera angles simultaneously on a split screen on day 2 of the trial. They watch the blood pressure sequence on Paulson's camera in 6 frames, spread across a 60-minute presentation. The courtroom is completely still for the duration. The foreperson will describe the 6 blood pressure frames as the 6 moments the jury decided everything it needed to decide. The plate check result, run by the second unit's mobile terminal at 10:21 p.m., the moment the second unit arrives, before the officer has finished exiting the vehicle, in the time it takes the system to respond. Result: St. Augustine Medical Center fleet vehicle, registration current, no stolen vehicle report on file, no flags of any kind. Time elapsed, 4 seconds. The exhibit is a single printed terminal output with a single timestamp. It is placed beside the body camera timestamp of Greer's patrol vehicle lights activating at 9:47 p.m. The 34 minutes between those 2 timestamps are the case. Patricia Osei's 11-page incident report. 4 calls in 29 minutes. Every call documented with the timestamp, the recipient, the information transmitted, and the response received. The duty sergeant's words on the first call. I will contact the officer. The duty sergeant's words on the second call. The officer is following procedure. The watch commander's radio transmission. Greer's acknowledgement. The vehicle not moving. Read in its entirety on day 3 of the trial. The jury is very quiet. The post-operative analysis, the surgical team's documented conclusion, an intervention beginning by 10 p.m. carried an 81% probability of success. The anesthesiologist's testimony, placing that figure beside the timestamp 9:51 p.m., the time Dr. Nwosu would have arrived if the plate had been run before the stop. The resident's testimony. Pressure was 51 when she entered. The gap between 81% at 9:51 p.m. and 2 minutes and 14 seconds at 10:29 p.m. is the 34 minutes on Meridian Avenue expressed as a clinical outcome. The jury does not need it explained. They have the blood pressure sequence. They have already done the arithmetic. Grace Osei's parking receipt. Not submitted as evidence in the conventional sense, but referenced in Grace's testimony on day 5, which lasts 68 minutes, and which the jury's foreperson will later describe as the testimony that made the damages number feel not excessive, but inadequate. Grace does not raise her voice. She does not cry. She is a mathematics teacher, and she gives the jury the numbers. 3 children, 16 years of marriage, 41 years old. Drove himself to the emergency room because he did not want to worry his family. Dead 2 minutes and 14 seconds after the surgeon who could have saved him finally reached his table. She says, I still have the receipt. She says, I wrote his name on the back of a parking receipt because I needed something to hold while I figured out what to do with what happened on Meridian Avenue. She says, I have figured out what to do. She looks at the jury. She says, that is why we are here. Caldwell deposes Greer 11 months after the incident. She asks him to identify the moment in the body camera footage when he understood that the vehicle was a legitimate hospital emergency unit. He says the precinct confirmation at 9:52 p.m. was the first moment he had verified confirmation. She asks what he did with that confirmation. He says he acknowledged it and continued to follow procedure. She asks whether the procedure includes a provision for overriding a confirmed hospital emergency. He says the procedure does not specifically address that scenario. She asks whether the absence of a specific provision means the procedure requires him to maintain the stop in the presence of a confirmed medical emergency. He does not answer. She plays the body camera footage to the moment at 9:52:31 p.m. when Dr. Nwosu says, "You just received confirmation. Move your vehicle." She asks Greer what his response to that instruction was. He says he told her procedure required physical verification. She asks whether the precinct's radio confirmation constitutes verification by any definition he is aware of. He does not answer. She places the plate check result on the table. 4 seconds. She asks him to read the timestamp. He reads it. She asks him to read the timestamp of his patrol lights activating. He reads it. She says, 34 minutes and 18 seconds between those two timestamps. He says, yes. She says, the check that would have prevented 34 minutes took 4 seconds. He says, yes. She says, you did not run it. He says, the procedure did not require it before the stop. She says, I know. She closes the folder. That is the case. The civil jury deliberates for 2 days and 1 hour. $22.1 million. $8.9 million to Dr. Nwosu. $3.4 million for the wrongful detention of a medical professional in active emergency response. $3 million for the specific and documented harm of 34 minutes on Meridian Avenue watching a vital signs screen decline while a 4-second database query was not initiated. $2.5 million in punitive damages directed at the institutional failure. The jury's written finding, noting that Greer followed a procedure that contained no exception for a confirmed medical emergency, and that the institution that wrote that procedure is the entity that bears primary accountability for its absence. $8.2 million to the estate of David Osei. $5.1 million for the wrongful death caused by the 34-minute detention. $3.1 million for Grace Osei and the 3 children, documented across 5 days of family testimony. $5 million in institutional damages, funding the David Osei Act. Legislation requiring that the license plate of any vehicle stopped in connection with a stolen vehicle alert must be run against the department's registration database before the officer exits the patrol vehicle. That the result must be logged on the body camera before any further action is taken. That any marked medical emergency vehicle whose plate returns a hospital fleet registration must be cleared immediately, regardless of any concurrent alert, and that any officer present at such a stop, not only the stopping officer, is individually responsible for initiating the plate check if the stopping officer does not. Closing the gap that Dana Paulson's 34 minutes of presence and non-action identified as the second failure inside the first. Greer is not terminated. The departmental review finds that he followed existing procedure and that the procedure is the source of the primary failure. He is retained, placed in a retraining program, and assigned to the working group that develops the new protocol. He contributes the pre-stop verification section. He writes it with the attention of someone who has watched a blood pressure sequence on a split screen and counted the frames and understood in a way that no training module could have produced what each frame cost. The David Osei Act passes the state legislature 5 months after the verdict. The governor signs it at a ceremony attended by Dr. Nwosu, Grace Osei, Patricia Osei, Dr. James Obi, and Officer Kevin Chen, a different officer entirely, present because he was the second unit that ran the plate check in 4 seconds at 10:21 p.m., and whose terminal output became Exhibit B. He is asked by a journalist why he ran the plate before he finished exiting the vehicle. He says, because that is what you do when you arrive at a stop involving a marked hospital vehicle. The journalist asks whether that was in his training. He thinks for a moment. He says, it should have been in everyone's training. It is now. The act is adopted in modified form by 21 states within 18 months. Its central requirement, the 4-second plate check before exit, is described in every adopting state's implementation documentation as the David Osei requirement. 4 seconds. His name on a requirement. 21 states. Grace Osei still has the parking receipt. She keeps it in the coat she wore to the hospital on February 6th. She carries the coat when she needs to remember that the name on the back has been said in a courtroom, entered into a verdict, and written into a law. The saying and the entering and the writing are not the same as having David Osei at the kitchen table on a Thursday morning. They are the things that were available. They were done. She still teaches the unit on rates of change, the mathematics of how quickly things move, and what the movement means. Her students do not know that their teacher has a parking receipt in her coat pocket with a police officer's name on the back. They know that she teaches rates of change as though the subject matters deeply to her. It does. James Obi completes his residency 8 months after February 6th. At his exit interview, he says, "I want the program to include a module on what to do when the surgeon you are holding for cannot get through." He says, "There was nothing in my training that told me what to do when the delay is not inside the hospital." He says, "I held for 34 minutes and did everything I was trained to do. The training was not the problem. The problem was 34 minutes of a patrol vehicle on Meridian Avenue that my training had no answer for." He says, "The answer is 4 seconds. It was always 4 seconds." The module is added to the program's curriculum the following academic year. It is titled, "When the Delay is Outside the Room." Its opening paragraph cites the David Osei requirement. Its author is listed as Dr. James Obi, St. Augustine Medical Center, Cardiothoracic Surgery. $22.1 million. A law in 21 states with his name in the requirement. A parking receipt in a coat pocket. 3 children without a father. A resident who held for 34 minutes and has been holding the weight of it ever since. A body camera that recorded everything from the moment the patrol lights activated to the moment the van disappeared north on Meridian Avenue. Time-stamped to 1/10 of a second, preserved automatically by the department's own systems before the night was over. None of it restores the 34 minutes. None of it restores the blood pressure sequence. 74, 71, 68, 64, 57, 51. 6 numbers across 6 frames of Paulson's body camera that the jury watched in silence. None of it reaches the moment at 9:52:31 p.m. when Greer acknowledged the precinct's confirmation and did not move. That moment is on camera. The camera does not negotiate with what it records. The David Osei requirement is 4 seconds. Every officer in 21 states who runs a plate before exiting their vehicle is, without knowing it, fulfilling a requirement that carries his name. He drove himself to the emergency room on a Thursday evening because the chest pain felt like indigestion and he did not want to worry his family. He was 41 years old. He had 3 children, a wife who teaches rates of change, and a parking receipt with his name on the back written in the careful handwriting of someone who needed something to hold. 4 seconds. His name on the requirement. 21 states. A body camera that recorded everything. Here is what we know. Officer Paul Greer stopped Dr. Amara Nwosu's marked hospital emergency van at 9:47 p.m. based on a stolen vehicle alert whose plate description matched the van's plate in 2 characters and nothing else. His body camera was running before he exited the vehicle. The van's markings were legible on his camera before he reached the driver's window. Dr. Nwosu presented her credentials in the first 30 seconds. She showed him the live vital sign screen. She asked him 4 times to run the plate. He did not run it. The precinct confirmed the error at 9:52 p.m. by radio. He acknowledged it. He did not move. Patricia Osei made 4 calls in 29 minutes to 4 different people with the authority to move the vehicle. The vehicle did not move until a supervisor stood beside it at 10:21 p.m. Dr. Nwosu reached the operating room at 10:29 p.m. David Osei died at 10:33 p.m. 2 minutes and 14 seconds. The second unit ran the plate at 10:21 p.m. 4 seconds. Hospital fleet vehicle. No flags. Never stolen. The body cameras recorded all of it. both angles, in the department's own archive before the night was over. So here is my question. If a van marked surgical emergency on 3 exterior surfaces, a live vital sign screen, a surgeon's credential presented in the first 30 seconds, a radio confirmation from the officer's own precinct, 4 calls from the hospital reaching 4 separate department contacts, and a body camera recording every moment are not enough to move a patrol vehicle in under 34 minutes. What is? Should any officer who maintains a stop of a confirmed medical emergency vehicle after receiving precinct-level radio confirmation face automatic criminal referral for the medical consequences of that continued detention, given that continuing the stop after 9:52 p.m. is no longer a procedural error but a documented decision made with full information? And should body camera footage of any stop involving a marked medical emergency vehicle be automatically flagged for supervisory review within 1 hour of its conclusion, so that 34 minutes on Meridian Avenue are examined by a watch commander before the patient's family has finished their first night without him? Share your thoughts in the comments. This story is not about a bad officer. It is about a procedure with no exception for a confirmed medical emergency, and an officer who followed it past the point where following it was the same thing as a choice. It is about a body camera that recorded the choice from the moment the patrol lights activated. It is about 6 blood pressure frames across 34 minutes that a jury watched in silence. It is about Grace Osei, who wrote a name on a parking receipt and came to Caldwell's office the next morning and said, "I want it to cost exactly what it cost." It cost $22.1 million. It cost a law in 21 states. It cost a requirement that carries his name. It cost David Osei. That is the number that does not appear in the verdict, because there is no verdict large enough to contain it. 4 seconds. Run the plate. Every time. Before the door opens. Thank you for watching. I will see you in the next story.